Now let's talk about what the dream scenario is for each team currently picking in the top 10.
Ooh, okay.
So it's got to start with Chicago. We talked about this a little bit last week with Mike. Me and Steve have talked about it a bit. What is your dream scenario for the Chicago Bears, given that they start with the number 1 overall pick?
I think the dream scenario for the Chicago Bears is Indianapolis gives you 3 first-round picks to go from 1 to 4, or like whatever it is.
Right.
That's the dream.
My only stipulation for any trade haul is that one of the first-round picks has to be next year.
Yeah,
I want 2 first-round picks next year, just in case.
Oh, 100%.
The thing doesn't work.
Yeah, and Ballard doesn't seem to be like a guy who's going to give up 3 first-round picks, especially to move from 4 to 1. So I think that what ends up happening is you get a 1 this year, you get 4 this year, you get a first-round pick next year, and maybe you get, a day 2 pick 3 years from now. Or like,
I think a lot of that though depends on just how frustrated Jim Irsay is.
And I think that Jim, not only does that go into it, but also I think there are a lot of other teams that would consider moving up to number 1, right? Number 1's going to be for sale for the Houston Texans at 2, the Indianapolis Colts at 4, the Vegas Raiders at 7, perhaps Atlanta at 8, probably not though, Carolina at 9, Tennessee at 11, New York Jets at 13, Washington Commanders at 16. All of those teams will call the Chicago Bears about potentially moving up to number 1. But I think their dream scenario is you don't want to go too far down because you still want to get Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, but getting some extra first-round picks and moving down.
I think 4 is absolutely probably the dream scenario, particularly if you can get that first-round pick next year.
But Ballard's going to know that too.
Yes.
And he's going to use that as leverage against them.
I also wonder, though, like just how good the scenario for them is. Like how good would the package be just to move down that 1 spot? Just from Houston, like particularly when you factor in the fact that Houston screwed that up by winning a random game at the end of the year. Like, what could Chicago get simply from moving down 1 spot to draft a player that we're going to draft at 1 anyway? That theoretically could be a dream scenario as well.
I just love that Chicago has the number 1 overall pick because it gives us some great conversations over the next couple of months.
So that brings us to Houston. After shooting themselves in the foot, what is their dream scenario?
Dream scenario is. The dream scenario is Chicago stays at number 1 and takes a defensive player, and then they get Bryce Young at number 2 overall. It's so funny. We did so many mock drafts for Houston throughout the season, and it was just Bryce Young in all of them. And now they win a pointless game at the end of the season, and now they might not have that chance. So I just think it's a quarterback one way or the other. You'd love for it to be Bryce Young, but if it's not Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, whoever it's going to be at 2, you just have to get a young quarterback.
Yeah, the sequence of optimal scenarios for them is number 1, the Bears are stuck at 1. They pick a player that isn't a quarterback, and you get the guy you were going to draft at number 1 overall anyway.
Right.
And the fact that you won the game doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
Number 2, somebody moves to number 1 and they draft a quarterback that you weren't going to take. So maybe the Colts love Will Levis and they can move all the way to number 1. And
that is the dream.
Jim Irsay wanders out there, stamps his flag in the ground, and he's drafting Will Levis. And then you get Bryce Young. And then number 3 is probably you trade and make sure you get your guy. I think that's probably better than not getting him if you believe he's the guy, Bryce Young. I think that's probably ahead in my sequence of scenarios.
For Houston?
Like, it's probably better to trade to number 1 and get Bryce Young versus sit there, let somebody else do it. And you pick number 2.
No, if you're Houston, like you said, it's annoying that you would have to trade up to number 1. But if you like Bryce Young more than any other quarterback in this class and it's not even close, pay the price, whatever it costs. Like you won the game, you can't change that.
Right.
Don't compile a negative with more negatives and end up not getting the quarterback that you think is going to absolutely change the future.
All right, number 3, Arizona. This is difficult because they're in such a state of flux overall right now.
This is another spot where I would trade down if I was Arizona. Okay. I don't think Arizona is anywhere close to competing. J.J. Watt was the best player on that defensive line. J.J. Watt is gone. The rest of that defense needs a ton of work. I think the secondary already needs a ton of work. They need work at the linebacker level too, even though they drafted a linebacker over the last couple of drafts. The offensive line desperately needs work. They're talking about trading DeAndre Hopkins. Kyler Murray's going to miss basically all of next year as well. So if I'm Arizona, you need help in both trenches. Could you draft a trench player at 3? Sure. You could draft yourself Will Anderson at number 3 and be happy with it, or Jalen Carter if you wanted to. But I think the most advantageous move for Arizona is knowing that if quarterback goes 1 and 2, and if the only other one in the conversation that a lot of people like is whoever's left between Will Levis and CJ Stroud, you then also have bargaining power with any of those other teams you could trade down to. So, for example, I look at Carolina, right? If Carolina gets outbid for number 1 overall, if Chicago doesn't want to move all the way down to 9, and Indianapolis goes up to get their quarterback, Houston then takes their quarterback to 2, brother, Carolina needs a quarterback. They can't sit at 9. They just can't sit there at 9, especially knowing that Vegas is sitting at 7.
Yeah.
Right? And especially, knowing that you've got Seattle and Detroit, maybe they're teams that are willing to move. They have a ton of flexibility because they have extra first-round picks too. So if you're Carolina, then Arizona might be in a spot where they go, all right, we'll trade down to 9. We'll draft what OT won in this class at 9. We'll draft, a Miles Murphy, a Tyree Wilson, or whoever it is at 9. They just need to get better in the trenches. And I don't think they have to do it at 3. I mean, for as good as I think Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are, this Arizona Cardinals team is nowhere close to a Jalen Carter or Will Anderson away from being good. I think they're a long ways away from being good, actually. So I would tell you the dream scenario for Arizona is trade down to 9, get some extra draft capital next year, and continue to build that roster the way they need to.
I mean, I think the single biggest thing is that Murray's hurt. Like, you're not talking about a team where even with everything they've got going wrong for them right now, they would have Kyler Murray starting week 1 and everything would look great, 100% healthy. Like, they're a team staring into next year where they might not have Kyler Murray healthy for most of the year, if not all of it. Like, that's a tough spot to be in. Indianapolis, number 4.
I mean, the dream scenario for them is that it doesn't cost them too much to move up to number 1. I don't really know I don't know if they can live in a world where they just like sit back at number 4 and just take whoever's
That's
left.
Probably too dream, right? Like,
right.
It's too much of a dream that they can,
the dream is Bryce Young. That's the answer to the question.
Well, so the dream is either Bryce Young, but maybe the real dream is that they actually think somebody's better than Bryce Young, and then it's possible to draft him at 4. Like, if you happen to believe that either Stroud or Levis either is better right now or has a higher ceiling.
See, but there's to me, and we're getting into kind of like what you said there, where like that's almost like too much of the dream.
Right.
Like, to me, there's no way 3 picks go by and Bryce Young doesn't get chosen.
No, but that's what I'm saying. So if you believe that either Levis or Stroud, either right now or in the future, is the better player over Bryce Young, you can sit at 4,
yes,
let somebody draft Bryce Young, and then all you got to do is get by 2 more picks before your guy comes up.
The dream scenario for the Indianapolis Colts is drafting your ideal quarterback, whoever it is, for the cheapest price.
Right.
Whether that is Bryce Young and you got to move up to 1 and just hoping it doesn't cost you literally your entire next 2 years drafts, or whether it's sitting at number 4, only having to use 1 draft pick on the guy who might be QB2 in this class, might be QB3 in this class, but that you actually think that is the best.
So
there's just so many different avenues that Indianapolis.
Just playing the either or scenario, if they have to give up, let's say 3 first-round picks to move to number 1 to get Bryce Young, Bryce Young plus 3 first-round picks, or CJ Stroud or Will Levis without moving.
I mean, I think Bryce is the best,
right,
by far.
But that's not the question.
So, but like
3 first-round picks.
But that's the thing, is that I am not a proponent of bargain bin shopping at quarterback. If you have a quarterback that you think is better and you have a chance to go get him, go get him. That's how I view it.
Yeah, but at some point the price is relevant, right? Like,
no. I'm not saying that the price is irrelevant, but like, you have to do it if you're Indianapolis at this point. What are you doing if not? Because if you sit at 4, what if you sit at 4 and you go, okay, well, we like Bryce Young clearly the most, but like, we also like Will Levis. Okay, well, what if Will Levis is gone? Are you just taking CJ Stroud? So you're taking a guy that, like, yeah, okay, we liked him. How much does that change what you do in the future?
But if Young goes 1, you probably only have to get by 1 pick, because essentially, like, either,
I don't know if that's the case.
Well, either Houston or somebody else drafting to 1 is taking.
I think right? Carolina's. Well, go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
At which point, like, one of your picks is probably Chicago, who aren't going to take the quarterback. The other one is Arizona, so you're relying on somebody trading out of that to draft the one other quarterback ahead of you. Like, if Bryce Young goes number 1, I would say there's a pretty good chance that the next quarterback makes it to Indy.
So in this scenario, I think that Carolina would probably be the one to get up to 1. So because Carolina, I think, is going to be very desperate. I think Carolina is going to want to be really aggressive for a quarterback. I think they're sick of it. I think they're sick of the quarterback carousel. I don't think they're going to want a veteran. I think they're going to want to invest in somebody. So in that scenario, I think it's probably Carolina that's moving up to 1. Quarterback goes 1, quarterback goes 2. And then if you're okay rolling the dice and thinking that Arizona's not going to move, which maybe they're not, that's all the intel that you do. You try to figure it out. Like, right. Perhaps Arizona's not even thinking about that. Perhaps Arizona's like, oh, we need a defensive player. Will Anderson's on the board. He's an unbelievable defensive player. We'll take Will Anderson at 3. I mean, then are you okay with that at 4? Maybe. But again, it goes back to just what I said. I'm not in the. You don't want to overpay. You don't want to get over aggressive. You don't want to burn yourself too hard. But when you're in a situation where you need a quarterback and you need a quarterback badly, and you clearly have one that you like more than another in a class, I'm not about sitting back. I'm just not.
Seattle, number 5.
Seattle can go a couple of different directions. I think that they definitely need help on defense. They need a second corner. Opposite Tariq Woolen. You can kick Kobe Bryant inside if that's the case. But I think the biggest need for them, especially with their first pick here in the first round, is defensive line. They need help at basically every defensive spot. Uchenna Nwosu was great. They drafted Boye Mafe last year, but they might want a more heavy-handed 5-tech edge player, less of a speed guy. So like a Miles Murphy, maybe somebody that you look into. A Will Anderson could obviously potentially be available, even though he's a lighter guy. Jalen Carter, I think, would be absolutely perfect for them. But I think it's something along the defensive line. I think one of Will Anderson or Jalen Carter making it to 5 is the dream scenario for them.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like Jalen Carter falling this far and Seattle getting him would be silly, as good as it can get for them. Detroit, number 6.
Kind of the same thing with Detroit. If it's a quarterback frenzy above them, we get 3 quarterbacks off the board. You're probably still not getting Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. Maybe there's a chance one of them's left, but I'm trying to think of like dream scenario.
Well, first of all, are you in the quarterback market?
I guess I think you are. Maybe the dream scenario is like CJ Stroud. Because Bryce at 6 is, I mean, there's no reason to talk about it. We don't need to talk about it. And then like, is Will Levis or CJ Stroud like a dream scenario for you? Not over Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. Well, they don't really, I don't want to say they don't need Will Anderson anymore, but don't want any James Houston slander here on this show, so I won't do that. The dream is Jalen Carter. But I think if one of the top 3 quarterbacks do fall, you probably think about it if you're Detroit.
I mean,
I think you think about it.
If CJ Stroud is there when Detroit is picking, that's very hard to turn down because you have Jared Goff.
Right.
I mean, I know, look, there's a lot of people.
And another year, Ben Johnson, too.
That are really enamored with Jared Goff.
Yeah.
I just,
Jared Goff had more turnover-worthy plays than he had big-time throws this year.
Yeah. I mean, Jared Goff was Jared Goff.
I think it was like 24 and 15 ratio. I mean, it wasn't good.
I mean, there's a reason Ben Johnson was one of the most coveted offensive minds in the offseason.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because Jared Goff is the best quarterback in the NFL. It was because, hey, look, he took this guy that was literally used as a make weight to get Matthew Stafford. Like, we got rid of this guy. We took on board this guy's contract to be able to get this trade done for Matthew Stafford. That is the value that Jared Goff had at that point. And he turned this guy into somebody who had pretty good numbers and everyone thinks played well.
Corner is also a sneaky pick that I like here. But I don't think that's the dream. That's just a strategy. I don't think that's the dream.
Nobody dreams of a corner at the top. Anyway. Number 7.
Detroit did when they took Okudah.
The Vegas Raiders.
Didn't go well.
True.
Quarterback. Any quarterback making it to him.
Any quarterback.
Will Levis, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, somebody making it to him at 7. That's what I think is the dream for them.
See, I joked about this before, but like if you go back in time to the Denver Josh McDaniels era, at the point, so there's a few steps in this process, but somewhere along the road is alienating your starting quarterback and getting rid of him, right? Mm-hmm. That's already happening with Derek Carr.
Right.
Then a few months' time, the next move is to find Tim Tebow in the first round. So if that holds, Who are we drafting at number 7? Who's Tim Tebow?
Oh, just pick another Florida quarterback. Just pick Anthony Richardson.
Another Florida quarterback turned future tight end.
Man, whoa!
Look. It isn't me. Look at Florida's quarterback history. There's quite a lot of future tight ends there.
Hey man,
That's all I'm saying.
Jacoby Brissett's doing great.
They've had quite a lot of quarterback turned tight ends.
They've had 2.
No, there's like 5 or 6.
Okay, wait. Okay, so Tebow counts?
Yes.
Okay, so Tebow, Felipe Franks.
Yeah.
Burton.
Yep.
Trent Burton.
Yeah, we have to count Driscoll because he's had like
Driscoll played quarterback this past year. I'm not counting him as a tight end.
But only because like they had Davis Mills.
I'm not counting that as a tight end. We've got 3.
He became like this gimmick athlete thing.
He
wasn't a quarterback. He became like they moved him back there when they were trying to lose games again.
We got 3.
I think there's more. Steve, look, the Florida guy isn't here. I don't have the kind of encyclopedic knowledge he has of the program.
Neither do I, apparently.
Okay, so they're not drafting Tim Tebow in the first, is what you're saying?
No,
okay.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
So what is Josh McDaniel's dream here?
CJ Stroud. I think it'd be a great dream for them. I think he could work really well with CJ Stroud.
What do you think McDaniel's ideal quarterback looks like? Because the Tim Tebow joking aside, that was the guy that he zeroed in as. He's the future.
Yeah, I think he looks for
Jordan Reed.
That's
another one.
Big, tall. Yeah, but Reed played tight end in Florida.
Also quarterback.
Barely come. Yeah, okay. I think McDaniel's type is bigger, taller quarterback, experienced. You're probably around 45 years old. Used to play for the Patriots. Wears number 12. I think those are the attributes that McDaniels looks for in a quarterback.
Does the Tebow thing lead you to suspect that like the thing that McDaniels values more than anything else at the quarterback position is that like leadership, galvanizing, you rally everybody around you quality? Like the actual playing quarterback part is almost secondary. Like I need a leader first and foremost.
Well, I think a lot of, I don't want to necessarily say, that like GMs and head coaches fall for that, but like
sure. I mean, it's important. Nobody dismisses it as a thing.
Yeah.
Generally, right?
Like I think that was a huge part of Jalen Hurts' scouting report, right? Where you take a chance on this guy is not only because of his ability, but also because of like who he is, and that is kind of coming to the forefront of like now that Jalen is the starting quarterback of the Eagles. That's a major selling point that everybody talks about. Like this dude is just an unbelievable worker. He's an incredible leader, and like those are the things that. I feel what keeps general managers and head coaches awake at night is not the fact that they couldn't evaluate how talented a player was in the game of football, athletically, whatever it was. What keeps general managers and head coaches up at night is evaluating people. Like it's evaluating the person. That is the toughest part of scouting when you were investing in these guys. And so knowing that is such a big emphasis of what could make or break some of the most talented players that come through the draft pool, it's easy to look at the failures of like, say, overdrafting Tim Tebow and you go like, what are you doing? It's crazy. But it is an avenue for you to understand why they do it, because they want to make sure they hit on that part and then they can teach you the football stuff. They can't teach you how to be a leader. You have to do that. Yeah,
they're far more terrified of missing on Tim Tebow the other way than the way that he actually missed, right? Like if drafting someone who's widely talked about as being like the best leader in the history of the world, drafting that and the guy not working out, okay, fine, we can live with that. Didn't work out, fine, but we drafted a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
But not drafting him and then him actually working out, knowing that he was this incredible guy that everybody loved and was a leader and would drag his team to the brink and overcome everything.
Right.
That's what haunts them. Like we don't want to not draft the incredible leader that was obviously an amazing leader. Because we didn't think he could play well enough. And then it turns out he could. Now we look like morons. That I think is way more haunting to these guys. All right. So Vegas dream scenario. Quarterback.
Yeah.
Whoever. So dream scenario, quarterback at 7, or they go home.
Yeah, I mean, the dream scenario is that you don't have to move and you get to stay at 7. Right. Now, there is a reality that exists where maybe the quarterback class doesn't go as hot off the board as we thought. So there is a realistic chance that I think that could possibly happen. Or, you're sitting here and we've talked a lot about Bryce Young and Will Anderson, and I'm an idiot. Bryce Young, Will Levis, and CJ Stroud. Said so many names already. Maybe Anthony Richardson at 7. Like, maybe he's the guy that you think that you could invest in at number 7 overall. I think it's pretty high, but I do think that the league's going to draft Anthony Richardson decently high.
An athletic Florida quarterback, huh?
Yeah. Now you could take Darren Waller's spot, I guess.
All right. Number 8, Atlanta.
Dream scenario for Atlanta.
I mean, they're another team that needs defense everywhere.
Yeah, they are. And there's a lot of avenues that I think Atlanta could be happy with. If you draft any sort of edge pass rusher, that's going to be good in this class. I love Jared Verse going to Atlanta. He's not in this draft class anymore. He went back to Florida State. I thought that he was going to be a first-round pick for sure. So I thought about him potentially at number 8. The dream is obviously Will Anderson, but unless you're trading out, unless Atlanta wanted to pop up to 3 with Arizona.
Yeah. That's starting to feel very unlikely.
And it's starting to feel unlikely because you are going to be bidding against teams that are going to be drafting quarterbacks. And that's a really bad place to be. You don't want to be a team who's looking to move up to number 3 to draft a non-quarterback because you're going to pay the price to outbid teams that are trying to go.
It's just not worth it at that point.
So you don't want to do that. But any type of edge rusher, a Miles Murphy, a Tyree Wilson, those are guys who have been in this conversation. Number 8 overall is rich for me for both Miles Murphy and Tyree Wilson, but perhaps that could be a spot there where they end up going edge pass rusher. Brian Brzee, a defensive lineman who I like, who's an uber athletic big guy, who he could be a target for them there. I also like corner. I really do. Like, if they take CB1 off the board to play opposite AJ Terrell, like, that all of a sudden really boosts what the secondary could be. And you go with a guy like Christian Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon. Those are my top 2 corners in this draft that I like a lot. I think this is the starting point in the range for when you could see those guys go off the board. So I'm not sure exactly which one the dream would be for Atlanta, but there's a lot of different options where they could come away and be happy.
Brzee and Murphy both out of that Clemson defense, and Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech.
Yes.
Right? Okay, where are we? Number 9.
8 or 9.
Carolina. We already talked. I mean, you were pitching them for number 1 overall.
Yeah, I mean, the dream scenario is either you can get a price for number 1 overall that isn't too egregious, and you go up and you get yourself Bryce Young. You can move up to number 3 and potentially take a quarterback that way. I mean, the dream scenario is staying at 9, drafting, let's say, Anthony Richardson, and he fully pans out. Like, that's obviously the dream. I mean, might be too much of a stretch, but that's why I put the other scenarios out there too.
I will say, obviously, Carolina has not been tremendously well run in the last couple of years, which is why people got fired. But I think there's something to be said for the discipline they had to not do something crazy last year and draft like Malik Willis in the first round, right? Because they needed a quarterback. It's like, no, we're going to take Icky in the top 10. Where are they? 6. We're going to have the discipline to wait out the quarterback thing, even though we have no picks, so like the next 100.
They got Matt Corral out of it.
Right. You end up getting Matt Corral. Doesn't work out. He gets hurt. Like, a lot of things didn't work out, but you're sort of seeing now that you then take another sort of swing at Baker Mayfield, which again, I thought was good process that didn't work out at all. Like, just came up snake eyes. I thought the Matt Corral thing was good process. Looks so far to have come up snake eyes because he got hurt and we haven't seen anything from him. But all of a sudden you're back now with the number 9 overall pick and with a shot of doing whatever you need to do to get a quarterback. Like, they, through, I think, good process and being disciplined, could feasibly emerge from this draft with a Bryce Young. Whereas the alternative, like, they could easily have gone, we need a quarterback now, desperately, draft Malik Willis at 6. Like, that would not, a year ago, that was not outside of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and, I think intel goes a long way into that, right? Like, you've got to trust your front office, your scouting staff to not only evaluate players, but like also know what the rest of the league is doing. Because the rest of the league, every single team, they're doing these mock draft simulations. They're doing a lot of what could be, who's going to be left on the board, when can we wait on a guy, and you always try to hit the sweet spot of like going up to make sure we get our guy, but not overpaying too much. So I do agree with you. They could have been in a position where, let's even say Kenny Pickett, right? Kenny Pickett goes off the board as the QB1 last year. He goes to the Steelers much later in the draft, but they could have taken Kenny Pickett at 6 or whatever it was in the top 10, and they didn't do that. I just think that they probably had some good intel as well, to where they probably wanted a quarterback, but they realized that taking one at 6 was going to be egregious. So sure, I guess kudos for some self-control there, but the dream scenario for Carolina is you're coming away with a quarterback that you are really happy with, that you think is going to turn the franchise around. I don't know who that's going to be for them. Certainly Bryce Young would be at the top of my list. You'd have to pay a pretty penny up to number 1 overall to go get him. But if you're okay with a CJ Stroud, if you're okay with a Will Levis, CJ Stroud's not going to be this home run pick. We talk about not every team liking Bryce Young. Not every team's going to love CJ Stroud, because for as much as he really helped his scouting report in that final game against Georgia because of how well he played out of structure and under pressure, the rest of his tape this year under pressure was bad. I mean, he I think had a 39.5 passing grade under pressure this year. Terrible. And think of who Ohio State is playing. Nobody's outside of Michigan. And he was awful under pressure. We thought he was bad under pressure last year as a sophomore, and I think his grade under pressure was like 60.3 last year. And it dropped all the way down into the 30s this year. Terrible. But against Georgia, the best defense that he faced, the biggest moment, the brightest lights, he had an 82.9 grade under pressure. That was the best game that anybody had seen from him. It's the final game that we saw from him. But all that to say, some teams are going to look at that last game and be like, see,
right,
I told you, look how good he can be under pressure. And other teams are going to be like, it's one game. So there's no guarantee that he also could go, he's like a lock for the top 3. He could maybe slide a little bit, and if he does, maybe that's the dream scenario for Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, you paint a good picture of their dream being coming out of this draft with Bryce Young. Okay, it's going to be expensive, but that's even attainable is, I think, fairly dream world for Carolina to be able to come out of that draft with what is the best quarterback prospect in this draft and on your way to somewhere. Last team in the top 10, Philadelphia. I mean, is the fact that they're picking in the top 10 dream enough?
Yeah, yeah.
They're in the NFC Championship game and they have a top 10 draft pick.
I mean, just they could win the Super Bowl and have a top 10 draft pick. It is absolutely wild. And there's not a lot of weaknesses for this team, right? It kind of depends what their offseason is going to look like. It kind of depends who they're going to lose. James Bradbury is playing unbelievable for them, so I feel like if they can bring him back, they probably will, because they probably think they're in a long-term Super Bowl window. But if they don't bring back James Bradbury, Christian Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon, getting CB1 in this class at number 10 would be incredible. I would love to see Devon Witherspoon in this Philadelphia Eagles defense. I think that would be a ton of fun. I think that could be a dream scenario for them. And maybe an interior pass rusher, like if Brian Brzee happens to make it to number 10, you put the athleticism of Brzee next to the uniqueness of Jordan Davis, and all of a sudden, like, that's a pretty nasty interior defensive line. That is just some unique size, strength, speed, ability from both of those players.
That's a very Philadelphia move as well.
And 100%.
It's future-proof that defensive line again.
And I can sit here and say, like, this Philadelphia Eagles team adding Bijan Robinson would also be, like, unfair. But is drafting a running back at 10 a dream? I don't know. Bijan's the best to choose from in this class. He was one of 3 blue chip players that Mike had that we talked about on It's Just Football. He had Will Anderson, he had Jalen Carter, and he had Bijan Robinson as the 3 blue chip prospects in this class. So if you get one of those guys at number 10, is it still worth it, even if it's a running back? Maybe for a team like Philadelphia, but that's probably where I would look. Something along the defensive line, or then if you want to get crazy and throw Bijan Robinson into this, I guess you can.
That would be fascinating.
It would be fun.
Over time, I've become a lot less entrenched against drafting running backs high versus paying them. Like, I actually think because of the rookie contract scale, even the most egregious running back contracts in the draft are not that bad. Like, the thing that you really don't want is the Zeke Elliott contract.
No, just absolutely debilitating.
That's the worst thing you can do when it comes to running back value.
Yeah.
Okay, spending a first-round pick on a running back generally, don't like it because of what you potentially pass up with that first-round pick. But, like, what the Jets did with Breece Hall, I don't really have a problem with that at all. And if a guy like Bijan Robinson out of Texas comes along who's being talked about as this, like, Adrian Peterson level prospect, right? I mean, if he's that good, a mid to high first round draft pick is not terrible value.
Yeah. I would tell you it's closer to like a Christian McCaffrey comp, where what Bijan brings is not only incredible ability as a ball carrier out of the backfield, but also receiving ability.
Right.
He's a really damn good receiver. There are times when Texas would even put him in the slot. You know, I think that McCaffrey was better receiver coming out of Stanford, and especially like now in his NFL career, he's just so seasoned as a pass catcher out of the backfield that like he's ahead of where Bijan is now, but Bijan could get to that point. He's that naturally gifted.
Yeah, I mean, my comp with the Adrian Peterson thing was just the sort of the
Impact.
caliber of prospect.
Sure, yeah.
Not even that, but like how good he's seen as a prospect. Like Adrian Peterson was this absolute can't miss, best running back to come along since, whoever, and had been like since his high school days. Like that was a guy who was being talked about as he could have gone straight from high school to the NFL. We have to wait to get through this Oklahoma career before we can finally draft the guy in the top 10 somewhere.
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of caliber of prospect we're talking about here, at which point, I think there is a discussion to be had about how early is too early to draft a guy like that, given the opportunity cost and the contract and blah, blah, blah. And I think it's probably higher than certainly a lot of people that have PFF attached to their names would want to admit.
Well, that's the thing, man. Me and Connor Rogers on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, we do mock drafts all the time, and we'll get to the 20s of mocks, and we'll go like, all right, well, where's Bijan Robinson going to go? Even Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network, I think his mock that he put out last week, he had Bijan Robinson going 28th to Buffalo, wherever Buffalo's picking, 28, 29, whatever it is. And I think everybody who makes a Bijan Robinson selection in the late 20s says, well, he's probably going higher than this. Yeah. We just don't know where. We don't know what team is going to take a chance on him, but he's just going to be viewed as one of the best prospects in this class.
And also, I think this is probably bad process and some kind of fallacy, but if I'm Philadelphia and I have a second draft pick coming along at 31 or wherever it might end up being, somewhere at the back end of the first round, I'm going to be more inclined to take that risk.
Sure.
It's not even a risk. I mean, I'm more inclined to accept the loss of opportunity because I get another opportunity in 20 more picks.
And that's, wait, are you saying the teams at the back end of the draft?
No, if I'm Philadelphia, I would be more inclined to take a running back at 10,
because you have
knowing that I have a second first rounder coming along than if
Yeah.
I just had the one first rounder.
Yeah.
It's like, this is your guy, you get a running back. Like, well,
Yes.
I also need a defensive tackle. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm more inclined to do that knowing that I have another pick, 20 picks coming down the line.
100%. Makes it a lot easier.
And I don't know that that's necessarily smart, but I think that's a psychological thing that will work in his favor for a team like Philadelphia sitting there.
Yep. I agree.